Have you ever wondered what it takes to bring down one of the most notorious drug cartels in history? Well, the story of Angel Alex, the secret DEA agent who tried to take down the Guadalajara cartel, is one that will leave you on the edge of your seat. From his rise to becoming one of the most respected agents in the DEA to the dangerous mission that ultimately led to his downfall, this is a story you won't want to miss. So sit back and get ready to uncover the shocking truth about Angel Alex and where he is now. Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, known as the godfather of the Guadalajara cartel, spent nearly 2 decades building his criminal empire. However, the murder of an undercover DEA agent who had infiltrated his organization proved to be his undoing. The killing was particularly brutal and became a pivotal moment in the downfall of Felix Gallardo and his cartel. Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, who earned the nickname El Padrino or the Godfather, has been the subject of fascination and intrigue, particularly following his portrayal in the popular Netflix series Narcos Mexico. However, despite his charismatic persona, Felix Gallardo was anything but innocent. His own prison diary, which was published in 2009 by Gatapardo magazine under the title Diaries of the Boss of Bosses, provides a window into his criminal mind and the brutal tactics he employed to build and maintain his empire. In his diary, Felix Gallardo detailed the inner workings of his cartel and its connections to high-level politicians and law enforcement officials. He also wrote about the violence and bloodshed that was necessary to maintain his power and control over the drug trade in Mexico. Despite his apparent candor in his diary, Felix Gallardo has never publicly admitted to any of the crimes he was accused of and was ultimately convicted for, including the murder of DEA agent Enrique Camarena. Felix Gallardo wrote candidly about his involvement in the trafficking of cocaine, marijuana, and heroin. He detailed the inner workings of his cartel, including its connections to corrupt politicians and law enforcement officials. Felix Gallardo also expressed a sense of nostalgia for the old days, referring to himself as one of the old capos who built the drug trade in Mexico. While the portrayal of Felix Gallardo in Narcos Mexico may suggest that his transformation into a drug lord was somewhat accidental, the reality is far different. In fact, Felix Gallardo was a highly calculated and strategic leader who rose to become the boss of bosses within the Guadalajara cartel. He was a master at building and maintaining alliances, and he had a keen understanding of the political landscape in Mexico, which he used to his advantage. Felix Gallardo's eventual arrest in 1989 triggered a massive drug war that ravaged Mexico and the surrounding region. The power vacuum left by his capture led to a wave of violence and instability that continues to this day. Felix Gallardo's legacy is complex and controversial, with some viewing him as a ruthless criminal responsible for the deaths of countless people, while others see him as a charismatic figure who helped to create a powerful criminal organization in a country where opportunities were scarce for many. Regardless of one's perspective on Felix Gallardo, there is no denying the significant impact he had on the drug trade in Mexico and beyond. His story continues to captivate and intrigue people around the world, and his legacy remains a subject of debate and analysis among historians, criminologists, and policymakers. The making of Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo. Despite his infamous reputation as a drug lord, Felix Gallardo's prison diary reveals a more complex and nuanced person, with a keen understanding of the socio-economic issues facing Mexico. He writes about the poverty and lack of resources that he experienced growing up, and he advocates for programs that would help to alleviate these problems, such as the reconstruction of villages and ranches, the establishment of assembly plants, and low-interest credit. These ideas reflect a concern for the well-being of ordinary Mexicans and a recognition of the role that the government can play in addressing these issues. Felix Gallardo was born on January 8, 1946, in state of northwestern Mexico. He grew up in a large family and experienced poverty and hardship from a young age. He joined the police force at the age of 17, and he quickly rose through the ranks to become a Mexican federal judicial police agent. It was during his time in law enforcement that Felix Gallardo began to make connections with drug traffickers, and he eventually left the police force to pursue a career in the drug trade. Felix Gallardo's rise to power was marked by a combination of cunning and violence. He built alliances with other drug lords and established a vast trafficking network that stretched from Mexico to the United States. At the height of his power, he controlled much of the drug trade in Mexico, and he wielded significant influence over the country's political and economic systems. Felix Gallardo's experience in law enforcement and his knowledge of the inner workings of the Mexican government made him a valuable asset to drug traffickers. As head of the Mexican Federal Judicial Police in Sinaloa, he had access to information about ongoing investigations, and he was able to use this information to protect his criminal associates. Felix Gallardo's department was notorious for its corruption, and he was known to have accepted bribes and other forms of payment from drug traffickers. For Felix Gallardo, the lure of the drug trade was not just about money, but also about power and influence. He saw an opportunity to build a criminal empire that would give him control over large parts of Mexico's economy and political system. After meeting Pedro Aviles Perez, Felix Gallardo was drawn further into the drug trade. He saw the potential for profit and power, and he began to build his own criminal network. When Aviles Perez died in a shootout with police, Felix Gallardo saw an opportunity to take over the business and expand his operations. Under Felix Gallardo's leadership, the Guadalajara cartel became the dominant force in Mexico's drug trade. He established close relationships with other drug lords, and he built a vast trafficking network that stretched from Mexico to the United States. The cartel's activities were marked by violence and brutality, and Felix Gallardo was known to have ordered numerous killings in order to maintain his power. Despite his notoriety, Felix Gallardo's prison diary reveals a more complex and reflective person. He writes about the poverty and lack of opportunity that he experienced growing up, and he expresses concern for the well-being of ordinary Mexicans. However, his criminal activities have had a lasting impact on Mexico, and his legacy as the boss of bosses continues to be felt to this day. Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo would then become known as El Padrino, or the Godfather, of the entire criminal organization. Felix Gallardo's massive success with the Guadalajara cartel. In the 1980s, the Guadalajara cartel, led by Felix Gallardo, became the most powerful drug trafficking organization in Mexico. They controlled the entire drug trade network, including the infamous Rancho Bufalo marijuana plantation, which produced billions of dollars in product every year. Felix Gallardo expanded his empire by partnering with the Cali and Medellin cartels of Colombia to export his products to Tijuana. Although there is no evidence to suggest Felix Gallardo met with Pablo Escobar, his partnership with other cartels helped strengthen his business. The Mexican DFS, an intelligence agency, protected the Guadalajara cartel from getting into serious trouble as long as they were paid the right people. This ring of corruption allowed Felix Gallardo to keep his team out of jail and his cartel operations safe from scrutiny. However, the murder of DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena Salazar changed everything. Camarena had been working undercover to expose the Guadalajara cartel's drug trafficking network, and his death triggered a massive crackdown by the Mexican and U.S. governments. Felix Gallardo was eventually arrested and sentenced to prison, and the Guadalajara cartel was dismantled. How the killing of Kiki Camarena ended the Guadalajara cartel. The downfall of Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo was a turning point in the history of drug trafficking in Mexico. After his arrest, the Guadalajara cartel splintered into various factions, leading to a blood-eater war for control of drug trafficking routes. This power vacuum gave rise to a new generation of drug lords, including the notorious Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Despite Felix Gallardo's arrest, his legacy lived on. The corruption and violence he cultivated continued to plague Mexico for decades. The cartels that followed in his wake have continued to wreak havoc on the country, leading to tens of thousands of deaths and untold amounts of suffering. The story of Felix Gallardo and the Guadalajara cartel has been the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and TV shows, including the hit Netflix series Narcos Mexico. The show has sparked renewed interest in the history of Mexico's drug trade and the impact it has had on the country. Today, drug trafficking remains a major issue in Mexico, with the cartels continuing to exert their influence over large parts of the country. Despite efforts by the government to crack down on drug trafficking, corruption and violence continue to be major obstacles to progress. Where is Felix Gallardo now, and what happened to the Guadalajara cartel? Felix Gallardo's arrest in the 1980s brought to light the level of corruption within Mexico's police force. His arrest resulted in the desertion of around 90 policemen and the arrest of several commanders. Gallardo's arrest also marked the end of his hold on the cartel, which he had built to unprecedented levels of prosperity. His downfall was linked to Mexico's violent cartel war, which was fought between other drug lords who wanted the power that El Padrino once had. Over time, some of Felix Gallardo's associates were released from prison. Caro Quintero was released in 2013 on a legal technicality, and Fonseca Carrillo was transferred to house arrest in 2016 under terms granted to elderly prisoners with health problems. Felix Gallardo tried to make the same transfer, but his request was denied, although he was able to move from a maximum security prison to a medium security one. As of August 2021, Felix Gallardo was 75 years old and granted his first interview in decades to Noticias Telemundo. In the interview, he denied involvement in the Camarena case and stated that he never met the manual. He also denied identifying with a character that was based on him in the Narcos Mexico series. Although Felix Gallardo's history with the cartel and his link to Camarena's death continue to inspire TV shows, films, and books, he will likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. The legacy of the cartel's operations has changed, with the cartels now operating on a regional scale, like the Sinaloa cartel that was once controlled by Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. The operations of the cartels have gone underground, and their impact remains significant. In 2017, a location scout working on Narcos Mexico was killed in rural Mexico, and his death remains a mystery. Well, that's all for today's video. If you found this video informative, please consider liking and subscribing to our channel for more thought-provoking content. Don't forget to leave your comments and suggestions down below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.